Hit the lights!
You've discovered the Halfwatt podcast. We want to educate and entertain by tapping into the most trusted source of new technology, the ones installing and innovating it. You, the tradespeople that build from the ground up. Join us as we talk with industry leaders, veteran contractors, and even some young blood.
Welcome aboard. Today I'm talking to a good friend of mine, Mr. Dakota Farmer. Hit it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's when you talk.
Okay.
Tell me this now, kids. If you've ever thought, oh, well, I want to start my own business. I don't want to work for the man. I just want to do it myself. Tonight's show is about that. Now, Dakota, let's start with you. How did you get in this industry?
Yeah, I was 21 years old. I was doing appliance delivery at the time. Yeah, and hating it because it was awful, you know. And I was actually trying to get into the elevator apprenticeship at the time, and I was going through the runaround with them not being able to get a spot going on. And
I mean, you don't have a friend in the
I
did.
You
don't have a friend in the elevator business?
I did even, and it wasn't enough, you know.
Really?
So yeah, I couldn't pull enough strings to get high enough up on their wait list to get moved up. And so family friend posted something on their Facebook, and it got back to my wife, her aunt, and she said, hey, you know, they just posted they're looking for, you know, good people, no experience, and think it might be worth a shot. So I went and interviewed for a company, and it didn't work out at the time when I went and interviewed, but they said, you know, we might have a job in 6 months for you.
Big timer.
And and I said, well, you know, I'm going to be trying to get into this apprenticeship, so if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And a couple months later, they called me and said they had a spot available, and they wanted to get me in doing inspections on their fire alarms, you know, and I got there, and I could tell pretty quickly that I lucked out because all of the sprinkler and hood techs that had been waiting to try and get in on the alarm side were, you know, a little upset that I got into it. Yeah, a little peeved that some dude cut straight into the alarm department. And
a little cry.
Yeah, a little bit, you know, but we all choose our jobs. They do not like hearing that either.
They do not. Sprinkler people can get violent.
Yeah, but I started out there and did that for about 2.5 years until the company that I was working for hired on Jason Wells. And he came out and saw me doing something on a job one day and was like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
It's like, I got a work order to replace a pull station. I'm here replacing the pull station. He's like, you shouldn't be touching that if you're not an apprentice or a journeyman.
Yeah.
That was news to me. And Jason helped me go through the process of getting into the electrical apprenticeship. And
so you'd just been doing it without even knowing that you were...
They handed me a voltmeter and keys and said, go out and do the thing and start doing testing. And then, you know, testing was no problem. That was easy, very straightforward. And really quickly, I just started asking the whys, you know, why does this do this? How come when I do this thing, this happens?
Sure.
Every other one does, you know, and for a long time, I struggled to get answers. The guy that was working there above me just wanted to keep everything close to his chest so that he was valuable, you know, and so everything would just
So talk about that for a second. We haven't talked about the company or the people. So so when you're working with a technician who doesn't want to share technical knowledge with you, how does it make you feel?
It's frustrating because I think that we've all been there and we all have the right intentions when we're trying to learn. You know, I'm a very naturally curious and intuitive person. I want to know why it's working. Just because that's how it works has never been enough for me. Let's dive into it. Why are we doing this? What's the reason behind that? You know, everything should have a process.
Everything should have a reason and a process.
Exactly. We're not doing anything just to do it here, you know, and nothing worth doing is worth not having a plan before you even start, you know. And a lot of what I would get was just go do your best. And it's like, right. But for our customer's sake and for my sake, like my best right now isn't good enough, you know, and I need that training, you know. And it was frustrating. You honestly get pretty bitter pretty quick. You start having that same animosity because it's like, well, if I'm not going to get help, why even go out of my way to, you know, try and learn, you know? And so I just kind of took it upon myself to when I was out on jobs just to watch other people, pay attention, you know, and just try and piece that stuff up. But, you know, the first couple of years of my journey into this was very stressful. It was very difficult.
When I met you, you were going through some of that.
Yeah, because it was just like...
And I met you at school.
Yeah, we met in class, and you were the second class that I had, and that was great timing for me because I'd taken a break from going to community college for a little bit, and when I went there the first time, I didn't have any direction as far as what I wanted to do. And I knew pretty quickly once I started doing the alarm stuff that I liked it, that it scratched that itch for me. It gave me all of the, why is this doing, gave me something to focus on and to really dig down and invest myself in, but it was stressful. It was stressful. And then finally, really your class was where a lot of the light bulbs started to tick. You started to go into some of the electrical theory, and it was like, okay, now I understand why a relay works. That's why this elevator that for the last 2 years I haven't been able to figure out is doing this, And so once I really started digging into the electrical theory, a lot of those unknowns went away. Nice. And especially in the fire life safety industry.
And you ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And let's be fair to the audience, because you were very inquisitive, and I think I would say almost every week we would talk for a while.
I'd come and grab you and say, hey, this is something that I saw that was doing this. You brought this up in class and said, this is why. Why would it do this otherwise? And once I had a little bit of electrical theory under my belt, it just became so much easier, because I actually understood what they were trying to do. I could actually navigate the meter. I wasn't just every time I touch these two wires together, the elevator shuts down. Why? If I could read a meter, I would have known before I even touched them together that what I mean? Just the little things like that. Things. And so I kind of got a lot of my experience backwards. I didn't have that journeyman.
I have to agree with you.
I didn't have that journeyman over my shoulder breaking down the electrical theory stuff for me up front, and then going out and seeing the problems.
Right.
I felt like I was given the tasks without the proper tools, and I tell people that all the time. It's like my feet were kind of thrown to the fire, and that's very stressful. But if you can make it out of that, man, you're going to have a lot of heads up on a lot of other people, And so when I finally left that company and started my apprenticeship, I worked there for about, 3 or 4 more months. And then I transferred over to another company in the area, and they started pairing me with some journeymen. And it was like, okay, I'm kind of starting to see not all journeymen are the same. I'm now training my journeymen on things that to me seemed trivial at this point, because I've already been through 3 years of seeing these problems before I even, had the understanding. And so now it was just felt like once the electrical theory and all of the actual, skills started to get tackled on, it was like I already have the understanding and the knowledge. Now it's just, how do I make these things work for me?
Yeah.
But
your energy at the second company, because I saw you again later on as you went through the fire class, your second company, you came with probably 10 times more energy.
Yeah.
Than
Absolutely.
you had at the first one, because the first one, it was a lot of confusion. What the hell's going on? Whereas
they're telling me I can do this when really it's my understanding that it can only be this way.
Right.
It seemed very black and white to me, and it's like I feel like I'm in an awful lot of gray area for what to me seems rather simple.
It should be very clear.
It should be very clear. Why are we even having to argue about this when I am having 27 other people tell me this, and you're telling me this? It just doesn't line up.
Now I want to take a quick diversion, because I think it was at class when you showed me the tool that you'd come up with at the other company. I don't know if you'd come up with it or Joe would come up with somebody, but it was
the knack tester.
Yeah. So talk about the knack tester. So folks, if you're into fire alarm systems, and I am. When you have to test a building by yourself, so you mind your own business as you do, you go to a 3-story apartment complex in Portland, and it's got a small system, and you're doing exit lights, fire extinguishers, sprinkler system, fire alarm system. What else? That would probably be it. And maybe backflows. Right. So you're all encompassing, and you're by yourself. So when you go to test the signals, test the actual bells, it can be daunting, because you've got a lot of floors to run. You've got to make sure everything's working right. So tell us what you guys came up with.
Yeah, they I believe they got it from a guy named Jim Frula, who works for Frula Alarm up in Washington. But it was just a Innovonics relay board with 4 input buttons, and you programmed the relay board to be normally opened but closed when you push the trigger, and you associate your trigger to each of the 4 outputs. You program them as non-latching, so that you have to hold the button down in order to get it to close. And then anybody that's ever worked with a NAC panel or had a helper, and they've had them actually sitting there bumping the wires on the NACs, you wire up the relays in series with the input. So you just pull off the common and then wire up your wiring to the actual fire panel. Usually at that point, we would either send a trigger with a pull station or just reverse the input to the polarity, reverse the polarity to the NAC expander in order.
Why do you have to reverse the polarity? Explain to my listeners.
So notification appliances work on reverse polarity because if they always had positive polarity or regular polarity, the device would constantly be in alarm. And so our fire panels are reverse polarity, so they actually provide negative voltage on the positive terminal and positive on the common until there's an alarm, and then it changes state and provides voltage on the regular terminals. And so if you know what you're doing, you can usually just reverse the polarity at the input of the NAC expander and put just those circuits in alarm without ringing out the rest of the building. And then at that point, you're able to actually just hit each of the 4 switches to actually only ring out one circuit at a time.
Nice.
So before that, when I would go and do an alarm inspection of the building like that, it was the same thing. It was one maintenance guy with 25 sets of keys. You'd set the building into alarm, and for the next 20 to 25 minutes, the fire alarms were going off. All the tenants were...
Because you have to go into every single apartment for every single sounder.
And if you're there by yourself,
then there's
right,
two
it's sounders, it's sprinkler heads, it's, all the other stuff as well, as you're trying to get into these units as fast as possible, and so the amount of time that you can keep the notification from ringing for the customer is a win every time. And so you're actually able to figure out, okay, button 1 is my first floor east NACS, button 2 is my first floor west, and so on and so forth. And once you figure out the pattern, you can basically walk in, bump it for a couple seconds, verify your synchronization, verify your strobe, make sure everything's still temporal 3 and all operational. And then you can let it go and it goes quiet. And now you're moving on to the next unit,
Nice.
And it might not seem like that big of a deal. I know a lot of companies just say, just let it run. But when you're the last apartment in that chain and it's been going off for 25 minutes and now I got to walk into your unit, you're usually not very happy or enjoyable to be around.
And it affects animals.
Yep.
So every time you walk into an apartment, there's a chance a dog or a cat will jump out the door or go crazy, because especially those before they went to the low frequency sounders.
Yeah, the high frequency
brutal. Sounders drove those animals crackers. So you have the chance that a dog can get out or a cat can get out when you open up the door, or it just flat won't want you in there.
Yep.
Or you're driving it crazy. Birds do the same thing. And then people who don't speak English, who don't understand what's going on.
Right.
And that was a tough one for me, was having to test and have people who I could not communicate with.
Right.
That I'm trying to explain. I'm just testing.
It's just a
they
test.
don't know that, and they're completely panicked.
Yep.
And they're like, "When is this going to stop?" And people work nights and babies crying.
Right.
It's, oh my God, it was a mess.
And they're just so much more understanding when you give them the heads up. Hey, I got to sound this thing for a couple seconds. There's only going to be 10 or so more devices on your circuit. This is only going to sound off 10 or so more times. And then at the end,
only on their floor.
And only on their floor.
Section.
Once you get to another section, they don't even hear it. It's just quiet for the remainder of the time. And then, if you have to go back at the end to do your 5-minute battery backup test, you just do that. You just flip the breaker off and put it on batteries, and then it's only 5 minutes, And so that 5 minutes plus all of the additional bumps to test it is so much more enjoyable than, for 25 or 30 minutes straight.
Rushing.
Just screaming. Everybody's in a rush. Exactly. This just makes it a lot more enjoyable.
I was at a place one time where they had a tray full, not a tray, but a board full of keys.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a bunch of us, and we were struggling to make sure we had because each apartment had its own set of keys on a cup hook on this board.
Yeah, it's just.
And at one point the guy dropped it, and oh my God, it was just
it becomes a mess very fast.
So that type of intuitive thinking and forward thinking and very customer centric.
Yep.
And as everybody who knows me knows that I care deeply about the customers, because this is, to me, this is a job that provides security or provides fire safety.
Reassurance.
It's for people to be safe. We're not out here twisting necks. We're not out here, making people's lives terrible. We're actually here to help save them. Mm-hmm. and that's an honorable thing in my world.
Yeah, it is. It's a very cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you just don't even realize. Literally until I got a job and they handed me the smoke cup and said, go test these smoke detectors, I had no clue that was even a job.
That you could even do that.
That was even something that could be,
People pay you for this?
Right, and now it's just like, man, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I love the industry, and.
So now you tested the same things I tested because we crossed paths there. Mm-hmm. So you do sprinklers, backflows, fire alarm systems, fire extinguishers. Did you do hoods
So
as well?
I didn't do hoods, and I also didn't hardly
hoods
do
either.
any of the sprinkler stuff, you know.
Okay.
I knew my way around it because I'd get sent on service calls where, you know, the panel's beeping, but it's actually a low air or it's actually a, you know, whatever, and you got to get in and mess with that stuff, you know. And so I know my way enough around to be dangerous, but no, I don't flow water. I don't do the backflows. I was very adamant at my first company. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to know fire alarm like the back of my hand before I take on a second discipline, you know, because that was their big thing. They wanted everybody, no matter who it was, they were going to send somebody out there that could look at the alarms, they could look at the sprinklers, they could look at, you know, and that's awesome. When you have a couple of those guys, that's very important because now you've got somebody that you can put on any job with anybody else and you know they're taken care of, you know. But I just always saw the alarm side as my ticket. Yeah. And I can't tell you how many people that I've seen that are pretty good at the alarms and then they decide to take on the wet side of things and then all of a sudden they're more of a sprinkler tech than an alarm tech. It just, I don't see a whole lot of people.
It can suck you in one way or
I don't see a whole lot of people that are like, man, I love being cross-trained.
Right.
You know, a lot of the people that I know that really enjoy it, they are full-time water or they're full-time alarm or whatever, you know. Not to say that you can't carve out a really good career doing both. And, you know, a lot of companies will pay you well if you can do both at a high level, you know, but I made the decision early on that I didn't want to spread myself thin. I wanted to know the fire alarms thing so well that, you know, I just didn't have to worry about it. You know, I spent so much of the beginning of my career worrying about knowing something that I was like, I can't even think about entertaining a second discipline until I feel good about this one.
Nice.
You know? And so enough exposure with the hoods, same thing. Anything that correlates with the fire alarm, I know enough to get my hands in, you know, but I'm not doing a testing on the other auxiliary stuff, you know. And I think that's worked out really well for me.
Okay.
You know.
What happened? So as you got close to being a journeyman, what'd you do? Tell us what went on in your life.
Yeah, when I was about to leave the first company that I worked for, they had a sprinkler guy there that was actually just about to go out on his own and start his own business doing the wet side. Okay. And I'd kind of been in his ear a couple times about just some things that had happened that I didn't really like, that I didn't really agree about, or that I thought was just kind of funky. And, you know, and he was the first person that was like, have you ever thought about doing this yourself? I was like, no, I'm barely thinking about doing this at all right now. Like, this is hard, you know? And he's like, no, dude, you're asking all the right questions. You have the integrity. Like, you should really think about doing this yourself. And that was the first time that anybody had really planted that seed in my ear that, you know, like, you could potentially do this for yourself.
Because when you came to me, you said, I'm thinking about going out on my own.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd run a small company. That's a lot of work. I think that's probably what I told you was that it scared and I wasn't a small fire alarm company.
Right.
It was a dog daycare, which is not anything like fire alarms.
No. Well, sometimes it can be, I suppose, but
there is poop. But anyway, when we talked about it, I was like, it's a lot of work.
Yep. I mean, that's pretty much the same response I got from everybody. Once my buddy Derek, that's who I'm talking about, Derek Langle, he's with DB Fire doing sprinkler stuff. They do an amazing job. And once he got in my ear and said that, it was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. You know, maybe I'll get into, you know, just a couple of the electricians that I know at the moment's ears and just kind of say, you know, have you ever thought about doing this? What were your setbacks? You know, the best people that are going to give you that advice are people that have been doing it, you know? And so throughout my entire apprenticeship, every person that either had their own thing or didn't, I just walked up and asked. I said, what caused you to either not or caused you to? You know, Grant Richards was the same thing. He said, you should go for it. There's no reason not to. Like,
and I know that Dave would tell you the same exact thing, because Dave was never happier as when he went on his own after. You know, this is what I tell everybody too, because everybody says the same thing. It's like, oh man, that's probably stressful. It's like, yeah, I was stressing my ass out working for the other people too. Like, I'm gonna stress working for anybody. It's just who I am. You give me accountability, I'm gonna be stressed out and make sure that it's handled right. You know, and I just kind of decided, if I'm gonna do that, why not do that for myself? Why, you know, the first company that I worked for, the old owner there, he was the old journeyman electrician there, and he started the company and he did everything on his own. And I just really saw the flexibility that he was able to afford for himself and his life and his family. And especially towards the end when he wasn't even living in the state for half the time.
It just made it really easy to want to replicate that. It was just like, wow, okay, here's the blueprint. Like, this guy did it. he told me he just
And
went
he was
for it.
successful?
Very successful. They did a great job,
Yeah.
and it was just like, okay, well, there is a path for me to do this, and so between Derek saying that and the old company owner really just kind of laying the blueprint for me. And when I asked him the same thing, it was like, yeah, you should go for it. You have the accountability, you have the, the attentiveness, like you ask all the right questions. Like worst case scenario, it's not going to work out and you're going to go be a lead technician somewhere else and you're going to be just fine,
Right.
And once
so I'm going to pivot right here. So how old are you at this point?
I'm 29. Oh, at this point, when I started the apprenticeship?
Yeah, when you started the apprenticeship.
I was 25. I had just had my first child born.
So you were 25 years old, and so we crossed paths, I guess, at the
25, 26, somewhere 26. In there. Yep.
I was getting out of the Navy at 26.
Okay.
So I couldn't find my butt with either hand and a GPS and a map. So I did not really know what the heck I was going to do, right? And I really did not fall into fire life safety until, gosh, I'd say probably it would have been 94. So it was probably 3 years after that. So 29 is when I fell into it.
Right.
When I finally realized, oh my gosh, there's something here. It wasn't until I was 32 that I actually had to get a license.
Okay.
And then I was 32, 33 when I went up on the hill and started working. So I didn't get my LEA it was a JLE until I was in my mid 30s, early 30s. So this is how far ahead of the curve you are.
Yep.
In your life. But you are right in the path of 90% of the people I know and teach. Honestly. Yep. They're right there. They're your age. There's a couple of us that are older, and I got one guy in my class who's way older than me. So I mean, that's there are some.
But
outliers.
Yeah, I felt like most of the people coming through the class were between 25 and early 30s.
Absolutely.
And it was an advantage for me knowing, like I said, the fact that I had that seed planted before the apprenticeship even started made me take it that much more serious.
And you did. I have to say, you're one of the students that took it very, very seriously.
I was not there to mess around. I was there to make sure that I was learning. And that's, where I spoke about again, like taking a couple of years off after I went to college the first time and not going to school just to go for something that I wanted to do. And I did poorly when I, was playing baseball in college. I was there for baseball and work, and school came last, and I flunked out and got kicked off the team because I couldn't keep my grades straight. Like it was, I had a tough time with that. But when I went back the second time, it was like, okay, I already know that I like this stuff. This is not just a world history class that I could care less about. Like this is all potentially, beneficial to me. And before, at that point, I didn't even know for sure that this was going to work out. I wanted it to, I wanted to start my own thing, but there was no guarantee. So it was like, okay, I could be a phone tech someday. I don't know. I'm going to take Grant's class just as seriously, and I'm one of those people that I'm so competitive. I hate losing more than I like winning. It's not about me winning. It's about me not losing, and so when it got down to it, like,
well said, sir.
I would go into all these classes with a chip on my shoulder. It's like, there's 10 dudes in here that do phones for a living. I'm going to kick their ass on every test, just because they don't know. I'm not telling them. There's no competition. Like that's just, I'm putting that chip on my shoulder, and I'm that way with everything. And, there was a couple different times where it was like, oh, you're going to take so-and-so's class. That class sucks. It's like, why? I like it. I'm learning. Like I just made sure that I never went into any of these classes with a bad attitude with I already know this, the only exception was fire. And, I just made sure that if somebody was taking time out of their busy life and day to come sit in front of me for 4 hours and teach me about something, I was going to listen, and when I worked at McDonald's when I was younger, my parents, they both worked at McDonald's too. They used to always say, be here now, no matter what is in front of you right here, right now, give 110% of your energy, because at that moment, that is the most important thing in front of you.
That is excellent advice. And obviously it paid off.
The other thing that my dad, they always said was, if you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're rotting. And that right there is so true.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, if you're green, you're growing.
If you're green, you're growing.
If you're ripe, you're rotting. It is the most true statement about journeyman electrician I've ever seen in my life. Because how many people have you seen the second they get their card, they know more than anybody. They're not studying the code anymore. That's the second they've peaked. They're not moving forward any further with that.
That's a stroke of brilliance.
That's just
yeah.
And I take that into every day of my life now, and it's paid off monumentally because, you know, I tell everybody, it's like, I'm not an accountant. I'm not an HR person. I'm an electrician that is trying to run a company. Like, I need help. What do I need to do this better? You know, I just sent my books to my bookkeeper for the first time a month ago, and I am terrified for the phone call that I'm about to get back from her saying, don't ever do this again. But, you know, how do you know?
How are you going to know until you try?
I was really afraid of failure. Same thing. You know,
so let's go. So before we go there, so you've got a wife and a kid.
2 kids now. Yep.
You've got a wife and 2 kids. But before you decide to go do this on your own, you had 1, right?
Yeah, my daughter was born literally a week into me starting the apprenticeship.
Okay.
Yep.
So she's basically 3 at the end of this.
4 now. Oh, yes. She's right? 3 when I finished up the apprenticeship.
And then you go back to a company. You leave one company, go to another. And after you got your work alone card, and then you started to transition to your own gig.
Yeah, the key there was the second company that I went and worked for, they did an amazing job. If you said, I'm not ready for this, it was put your tools down. We will apologize to the customer. We will get you back out there with a trainee and make sure that this does not happen again. Yeah. You know, they did an amazing job like that. I didn't work a single minute unsupervised. You know, they made sure that I had a journeyman with me because I told them that was a big deal. That was a deal breaker. Like the prior company could not keep a journeyman in front of me, and I'm not going to forge my hours. You know, I think the first 3 months that I did the apprenticeship, I think I claimed 82 hours.
Wow.
You know, because I was just like, if I'm doing this, I'm going to be honest. I need 6,000 hours. Like, I'm not going to lie, you know? And so I went to United, and they knew that, and they made sure that we are not going to upset you. We're not going to do wrong by you. Like, you know, both sides enter that agreement. If you're going to bring on an apprentice, you are saying that you're going to do this right. And that's how I feel about it. Again, back to the gray area thing. And
I didn't walk out of there without some skills.
No, absolutely. I learned a lot, you know, and
a lot of licenses.
And even though a couple of the journeymen that I got partnered with, even though they might not necessarily be able to teach me a lot of stuff about the fire, they taught me a lot about troubleshooting, a lot about, you know, hey, I saw you trying to pull that cable. Don't do that. Do this instead. You know, I just made sure that whatever they were good at, I paid attention, and I made sure I could hone my skills in some way. You know, the old timer that I worked with when I got there, he was 70 when I'd finished up my second year. He was just about to retire, and he just knew so many old tricks, and he knew the old systems like the back of his hand, you know, and so he couldn't really help me with the addressable stuff or with any of the new stuff, but I didn't really need that at that point, you know. It was just, what can you teach me about this stuff? The first time I saw him pull out a capacitor and replace that, it was like, whoa, okay, that's neat, you know, just hadn't seen it. Just, you know, little things, how to run a toner, you know, just all the
all the tricks.
Everybody has skills that you can learn something from, even if they don't. Even if you may not think it at first, you know, and that was important. My second journeyman, when I was there, he was mostly doing Berg beforehand, and you know, and so then I kind of got to teach him some fire stuff, you know, and he got to teach me a lot of the wire pull because he had done a lot of install.
So you're just as proficient with Berg as you are with fire.
No, I wouldn't say that. I try really hard not to be, if I'm honest. You know, I know my way around it, you know, because they have a lot of overlap, you know, but I don't install Berg systems. I just tell people, like, if I don't feel like I can do this job better than 95% of the other people out there, I'm going to let those people do that facet, you know, and I'm going to be better than 95% of the other people when it comes to fire, and it's going to work out, you know. I'm at the point right now where I don't have to venture out of my comfort zone. You know, I hear people all the time say, you're going to do a little bit of everything. It's like, maybe, you know, but as long as there's a fire marshal running around, and, you know, I've got 3 or 4 other businesses, fire companies in the area that don't really want to take on the new install stuff, and they're like, this is who you need to call, you know.
Okay, so now you go to United, you go back to where you came from.
Oh, excuse me.
And then at what point do you transition
I'll get back to that.
Farmer Fire Protection?
Okay, so United was awesome in that regard, but it felt like when I got to the end of my time there, I was just doing a lot of test and inspect and then repairs on what I found. Okay. And so I didn't necessarily feel like I'm getting all of the skills that I need as an electrician. I feel like I'm becoming a better employee for United in terms of I know their customers. I know how to inspect these buildings. I know their clientele base like the back of my hand. And that makes me a better employee for them. But I knew that the place that I'd left beforehand was having a tough time keeping journeymen, you know, and I kind of looked at this as an opportunity for me to, number one, help them out. And then number two, I knew that because they were having a tough time keeping journeymen, they were having a lot of systems where it was little things that, 3 years ago when I started the apprenticeship, but I just had no clue how to do, that I could fix.
Got it.
And I knew that I would be presented with a lot more opportunities of potentially those stressful days.
Now,
But-
so I did not know that. That makes a lot of sense to me
Yep.
because I scratched my head when you left.
A lot
'Cause
of
I
people
thought,
did.
Well, you were doing great there. Right? You
Yep.
had your whole life ahead of you, so to speak, and it's
it
a
was
good company.
It was
so-
good, and right before I left United, I went to them, and they had asked me if I wanted to be in management prior to that, and I had kind of just shot the idea down. I was like, look, I'm busy trying to take care of myself. As an apprentice, I don't think your journeyman would appreciate me being their manager, number one, and number two, I'm worried about me more
Wait a
importantly.
minute, my apprentice is my manager.
Yeah, right.
Oh, this is so confusing.
And so I had told him no.
That's
the
for you,
first time.
Chris.
The first time I had told him, thank you, but no thank you. I appreciate the offer, but I just don't think I'm in a position right now to handle that, And right before I left, I went back to him because I had already known, like, my plan is to start my own company. If I can't become the best electrician here, maybe I can get into management and I can learn some of the bids, some of the head end stuff that I hadn't figured out. And so I was always just trying to figure out what angle I could adjust and pick up and learn to, have some stressful days for them instead of having them for me.
Sure.
And they had just promoted somebody else to a manager that was doing a fine job, and I wasn't trying to say like pick me or them, it was just a, hey, this is kind of a last opportunity, for you guys if you're interested. And it ended up not working out. And I just went back to the prior company that I worked for and I said, look, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And I didn't burn any bridges when I left the first time.
Good.
I kept it respectful and they were more than happy to bring me back on. And so I got a nice little pay raise to, come out and use my work alone card, and they'd say this system's been in trouble for however long. And we've sent so many guys out there and wasted hours that, we can't fix it. And I got to go around and take care of that, and there was just a couple installs that they were trying to get wrapped up that I was able to, go put some finishing touches on and tie up for them. And I just got a lot more of okay, this is what I want to see as the owner of my business. These are the problems that I could see, and I just felt like I became a better electrician there, and it was just like the final bow for me of what skills do I need to refine in order for me to feel like I can do this on my own. Okay. And so when I left United and went back to the first company, I had told them, like, this is my goal. By the end of 2022.
And they were good with it.
They knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was at the end of 2021.
Because I remember talking to you, because you and I have talked quite a bit.
Yeah, I've made sure to keep tabs with you.
Yeah, when you would call me about technical questions and things like if there was like EST questions.
Yeah, if I ran into an EST panel or whatever,
I can help you with that. With that. But I felt like you'd always kept in contact with me, and so I kind of watched you progress. So now that makes a lot more sense to me because I didn't really know all those details.
Right.
So when you decided to go out on your own, did you do part-time at that company and then go out on your own?
So for the first couple months, it was kind of in and out. I hadn't figured out my insurance and I hadn't figured out a couple of other things. And so I went back to Metro and was like, look, I know end of 2022 was the goal. I'm just not there yet. Can we push it out a couple months? And then it turned into 2021, excuse me. Then it turned into spring of 2022. And I was like, hey, I still just haven't got the vehicle.
I'm super happy that they let you keep an oar. You could paddle on either side of the canoe.
Oh yeah, and they kept it. They kept it completely open. It was like, as long as you're willing to be here, we're going to have work for you. We're going to be happy. And yeah, that was very nice. I'm very thankful for the opportunity and the fact that they gave me that. They let me stay on about 6 months longer than originally intended until I was ready. And then so then I stepped out on my own. And I had a couple of bids that had already been accepted just from word of mouth from, a couple of them.
Before you go to this, so I'm going to put a pin in that. We'll talk about bids next. Tell me about insurance, because everybody I've talked to says, oh, I can do my own thing. Everybody says, oh, the liability insurance is going to kill you. Tell me about your insurance. What does it, how does it work, and was it affordable or not?
Yeah, so it was affordable. Okay. I, again, went through my buddy Derek because he had just started his company. And so I just called him and I said, here's the kind of working capital that I'm looking at. Here's what I've already spent. Here's, I think I'm ready. And he was like, it sounds like you're ready to me. Like, here's what you need to do. And so he actually put me in touch with the gal that teaches the CCB classes because I had to get my contractor's license.
So you had to get a contractor's license.
Yep. And so he put me in touch with a gal out there in Scappoose, and she's just old timer. She's been doing this for, 40 years. You call and tell her what you're going to do, and she tells you actually need 3 companies so that you can, spread out your liability. Okay. She's the genius behind the business stuff.
So the Scappoosian helps you with your CCB.
Yep. And so I went through her CCB class, and I just asked a ton of questions in that class. And it was kind of funny, everybody's in the class is saying, I want to do this and I want to do this, and how do I pay as little to do that? That was so many of the questions. And I said, I want to do this. Like, how do I do it right?
So you went to the state and you got yourself your name.
So I went and got my name. And because of the questions that I'd asked her in class, she pulled me to the side and was like, you've asked all the right questions. You have the right approach to this. Like, if you would like.
I can see here. You have passed the test.
Literally. And
here's the ring.
And she offered to help me set up my business. So
No kidding.
I paid her, to do all of my paperwork. She literally sent me 2 forms, said, sign these, send a check with $100 to this person. She did my name, paperwork. So
Farmer Fire Protection Incorporated, because you're wearing your shirt, is your name. It's registered with the state of Oregon. Yep. I'm sure it's registered with Portland. If you have do you work at the city of Portland?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. So you work at the city of Portland, so you got to register it with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you got your,
I'm incorporated. I'm an S Corp.
It's S Corp.
Yep.
So that's what you set up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so I just basically said, like, right now it's just me, but in the future I want to have employees. Like, I'm not trying to do this 6 times. I don't want to start out as an LLC and then outgrow that and have. It was just like, if I want to be legit, what do I need to do day one? Okay. And so she walked me through the workman's comp, all of that.
And Derek was one who got you in touch with her.
Derek was the one who got me in touch with her.
I would love to talk to Derek.
You should.
If you could get Derek on this podcast, I would love to see him.
He does a great job.
Because I think people need to hear the help smooth the process so that they can follow in your footsteps if they want to do
exactly. And sprinkler techs have feelings too, so it's important to get their feelings heard out here too. They're people too. I tell people all the time, low voltage electrician are people too. And they fall into that too.
Well, we're not really.
No, we're not. We're masochists actually,
we are kind of weird.
But then same thing. Derek got me in touch with his insurance company. Okay. He said, "This is the guy that did my insurance. Give him a call." And so it was the same thing. And I just called their insurance. They're out of Oregon City, and I said, hey, this is what I'm trying to get started. I have 0 gauge. Like I could make $6 next year. I could make 600,000. It really, there is no idea, And so they just sent back a form. They're like, well, that's kind of hard to work with, where you're going to have to pick. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, well, I'm just going to guess that I'm going to make $100,000 next year. Because it was like January, it was like June at this point. So it's already been half the year. And so I just had to make a guesstimate on what I was going to make in each facet. So in fire alarms and in exit lights, they needed me to put a price on both of them. And exit lights have kind of went to the side. I haven't got a whole lot of business for that. And so I've just been doing the fire alarm side of things. And they said, okay, for $100,000 annually in fire alarm system income, this is what you're looking at for, residential, commercial bonds, liability, the whole 9 yards. And they gave me a price, and it was like $6,000,
A year.
Yeah, a year. Paid half up front, paid half later with an audit at the end. I actually just finished filling out that paperwork last week because they had to verify. You said you were going to make $100,000 last year. How much did you actually make?
So they're going to look and see.
And then,
and then they can ratchet it
If I made double, they'd charge me double.
Right.
If I make half, they ain't writing me a check for half. That's you guessed wrong.
You chose poorly.
Exactly.
Michael.
And so I just always erred towards I'm going to guess under and I'll pay it at the end. And if I make twice as much, I better be able to afford the insurance.
Caught me. So if you made half that much, then they would drop your rate down accordingly.
They might. I heard that they wouldn't from Derek. They would just say, you said you were going to make this.
We're from Oregon City. You're paying.
Make a better guess next year. And so once I had the insurance and the company stuff set to go, there was really no excuse. I was just kind of waiting for a couple of jobs to come through. And again,
now you'd had contacts that you'd made, and you had still partnered with your firms that you'd left. So so they could shovel work your way if it was something they couldn't take on.
Yeah, exactly.
So because you didn't burn any bridges.
Both of the companies that I worked for prior, they were really good at the inspections, and they were really good at the minor repairs. Their inspectors could go out, they could find the problem, they could carve out time to get a journeyman out there to replace that, thing. But neither of them took on hardly any new stuff. And I get why, because it's an undertaking. And if you don't have that one brain in the office that's driving that machine, it goes to hell in a handbasket really fast, And I just kept kind of looking at it like, okay, these guys don't have any of that market cornered. These guys don't have any of that market cornered.
So you found your niche.
And I didn't burn any of those bridges, and it was the same thing. And both companies kind of reached out to me on their own and were like, hey, if we get quotes for new installs, can we kick those your way? Like, we don't want to handle these. And it was like, absolutely, you can. Please do, and Derek, again, was the one that really got me my first big break. He was the one that sent, contractors my way that had systems coming up. And, still to this day, I get calls about once a week. Yeah, DB Fire recommended you, because he's only the wet side. He doesn't do any of the alarm stuff. And so we've kind of formed
But if he puts in a wet system, then you can also
he's saying, he's saying this is who I work with on this stuff. We have a rapport, like he's good,
Good.
Talk to this guy. And so there's been a handful of calls where it's like, yeah, Derek recommended you. We don't even want to talk to anybody else. Like, just get us a quote and let's move this forward. Like that's been really nice, And then same thing, because I haven't burnt any bridges and because of the way that I carried myself in class, I've got 4 or 5 different alarm companies in the area that are either shuffling work to me, or they're calling me and saying, hey, can we book you out for 8 hours next week? We need a second pair of hands on this job.
So this business, because of the way that you've approached other companies and other people, their business is now trickling in, and now it's moving in at a faster clip.
Absolutely, because I've always made myself available, because I had that experience with my very first boss in the industry of keeping everything close to the chest. I am the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I dare you to try and do better than me at this. Like if you are, I have done a damn good job. Like I don't have fear of that. If somebody wants to come and do this, it's a lot of work, and I will show you every step of the way, and you can do it.
Good.
I'm not sitting here trying to hide any of this. If I have 10 of me working for me in 10 years, I have done something really right. New people wanting to learn is not a threat to me.
It gives me goosebumps, because that's a hell of a good philosophy.
It's the truth. I mean, anytime I tell people that I worked at McDonald's for 6 or 7 years, I get the same face.
Why?
It's like, why? I got to work for the most successful company in the world. I got to see how all their processes were reduced down to where.
Where I learned that was from Brad.
Yep.
Brad Russell did the same thing. Where because his wife worked for him, he worked for him, and I said, work for McDonald's, and he goes, oh, let me tell you about how they're organized. Yep. Bam, and I was like, and he goes, and it taught me a lot.
It doesn't matter if you're a 15-year-old kid that doesn't give a crap about anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a 55-year-old Hispanic woman and your English isn't great. They can break down the process to a simple enough fashion that anybody can do it.
Nice.
So now, even though I'm not making Big Macs, a lot of those same principles still apply to my day-to-day business. And I had a cool career at McDonald's because I did a little bit of everything. Everybody starts out in service. You're at the window. You're taking money. You're doing the drive-through. But then I kind of got pivoted into doing a lot of the planned maintenance. So every week you had to go temp the coffee pot and make sure that it was coming out at exactly this many degrees. If it didn't work, you had to go grab the programmer and change it and read the and so that was really my first.
So you had to learn PLCs.
Yep, for every single piece of equipment.
Programmable logic controllers, kids. I told you, it's all about programmable logic controllers. So here you're programming a coffee pot.
Yep.
And it's not hot enough because it's got scaling or whatnot.
So you got to figure out how to turn it up
the temperature
or turn it down because you just burnt some lady's crotch in the drive-through or what, because that's what happened.
Big timer.
They weren't taking care of their machines, and
so it just came out too hot.
It came out too hot, and they had known that it was coming out too hot, and they handed it out anyway, and she burned herself, and they got sued because it was a known thing because they had been taking their weekly temperatures saying it's coming out at 208 degrees and it should be 195. Wow. It's just that level of every one of these machines is operating correctly.
So you started doing preventive maintenance on everything in the machines,
yep,
that kind of gave you.
That gave me my first real intuit of why is this machine not working when it's been working for the last 15 years? What could have changed? Exactly. And it's funny, the first time they had me do the shake machine cleaning, and that's the reason why the shake machines at McDonald's never work is because they're not cleaned correctly. They go into heat lock, and the manual is in Spanish. But I took 10 years of Spanish and I'm fluent in it, and so I literally read the shake machine manual in Spanish and taught myself how to clean it, Yeah. And just, again, in high school and middle school, it was just like, okay, this could be important. I see a lot of Hispanic people in my class. Like I could learn this, and by the time I got to college, I was pretty fluent and it's just made it really easy. Same thing, how often you walk into a job and there's a cleaning lady
Tons.
that's just scared shitless because the
Tons
alarm
of
just
times.
went off,
Yeah,
and it's like,
tons of times.
just relax.
Yeah.
And I can break that wall instantly with 2 words. They're like, oh, okay, like I can calm down. It's not just some random tall guy in there screaming at you in English while the alarms are going on. You know how stressful that can make it. So to be able to walk over
Just
and
yell
say,
louder.
right?
I think if you yell louder, they'll understand.
So be able to just walk over and say, hey, this is just a test. Give me 5
Nice.
minutes and it'll be over. It makes it so easy to ice over a lot of those, stressful moments. And
Well, I had no idea you were bilingual.
My vocabulary's gotten really bad now because, I used to go take classes and then I'd go to McDonald's and I'd have 5 or 6 different people to practice with.
Yeah, to talk to.
And so a lot of the times when I was working at McDonald's, I was hardly speaking English at all because it was just, I'm going to go communicate with all of these other people, and so it really hammered home all of the lessons and things I was learning in class. And, I miss it now because I'll go back and I'll see an old McDonald's coworker and they'll start talking to me. It's like, I don't got it like that anymore. Hold on. It's been 3 or 4 years. You write it out on paper?
Let me get my phone out.
I can read it, and I'll say silly things and they'll laugh, and you just got to laugh because,
Let me get my universal translator.
Exactly. So no, it's just been really cool to see all of my skills kind of culminate into this now, because at the time when you're learning them, you don't realize, you just.
Oh, I had no idea. I had no idea you had this much of a background that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
Here I thought I knew everything there was to know about Dakota Farmer, and I already knew crap. So, hey, Mike here. I just want to do a quick shout out to all of our listeners. Now, listen, it's been a wonderful couple of months getting the show moving, and we have seen a ton of growth, right? You guys are doing your part. People are downloading. You're telling people. That's super important to get this podcast on the map, okay? We've got good lineup of folks coming in the studio, and the biggest thing that I want you to know is that I want to hear from you. You, the person listening to this, all right? You want to be a part of this show. You want to talk about tips and tricks. You want to talk about things that you're learning in the trade. You want to talk about how this has changed your life. You want to talk about stuff like that, send me an email, okay? It's halfwattpod@gmail.com. And I'm interested in hearing about people who are in the union and people who are not in the union and people who are technicians and people who do alarm work, people who do camera access work, stuff like that. It doesn't just have to be fire alarm monkeys. It could be anybody. All right? So let's talk about this so that people can realize that this is a career that will change their life. So we were talking about bids. So you started getting bids and you've got work coming in from previous employers and people that you've partnered with that have helped you get a heck. And I'm sure you would, you help those guys out. You throw them business as well. Oh, yeah, of course. You need your stuff inspected. You should probably call United or call Metro.
The thing I tell everybody is there's enough pieces of pie to go around. Everybody can win.
Everybody can win.
Everybody can win. It's the first thing I tell everybody. If I cannot take care of you, I'm not going to tell you that I can. If I can't take care of you, I'm going to tell you who can, because it's going to be easier for them. They're going to do the right job. They're going to do right by you and your people. Yeah. Now I'm not in there freaking out because I can't do this. I sold somebody that I can do something that I can't, or that I can't do adequately to my standards. Forget that. You're not going to BS them. If I can't do it, I'm going to tell you who can, and I'm going to give them the shot to do it right. And hopefully down the line, something comes up that they can't do, and they're like, hey, didn't Farmer throw us that work because of this, that, and the other thing? Hey, tell them to give them a call, nice. And it's just worked out.
So now when these bids come in and you're looking at them, are you doing the drawings and then having somebody sign off on them? Are you signing off on them?
Yeah,
I know you're working on your Nicet.
Yeah, when I had first started in the industry, I would get the bids. Okay. I would take the prints. I would print them out on paper, and then I would go through and design the system on paper, and then I would send them to my CAD girl, and she did a good job. But it just took a long time to get my prints back, because she had CAD that she was doing for a living, all the time. And then she was trying to do my stuff on the side. Okay. So there was a couple times where I kind of got put behind the 8 ball because I sent them my prints 2 months ago. I haven't got them back. I can't get them stamped until they're back. Like, I'm sorry. I don't have an answer for you, And so over Christmas break a couple months ago, I actually taught myself the basics of AutoCAD and bought a CAD program. And since then, I've been doing all my own CAD prints.
So you're doing CAD or BIM?
I do. It's Alarm CAD is the name of the company. They use a They use
you told me about that. You did.
They use a OEM. They use an OEM AutoCAD program.
Yeah, because you said it had all of the devices in it. So, okay, kids, Alarm CAD. Dakota called me about this a couple weeks ago, and it had all of the alarm devices in it, and they update them so you can drag them over and drag and drop.
Yeah, when you start the project, you say, these are the 4 manufacturers that I'm going to use. I know I have a Silent Night controller. I know I'm using system sensor smoke detectors. I know I'm using, Firelight or whatever, pull stations, and the generic stuff. And when you do that, it automatically pulls all the devices and all the products that it has in their system onto a project manager on the side. And once you select that, you then go into the device manager and you just type in 2WB. It's a smoke detector. And it'll pull up every single version of a 2WB, whether it be a TRB, a TAB, a 4W TAB with a relay base, with a sounder. You go select the correct option and you put it down on the prints. Once you have all your devices on the prints, you hit connect, and then you go through and you individually connect each device to the panel just by clicking on them. You click on device 1, it's going to make that smoke detector device 1. You click on 2, it makes it device 2. Same thing with all the notification devices. Then you hit enter and it runs all the wire. It shows you where your wire run's going to go.
God.
You go over to reports and you say, okay, I need a voltage drop report. And it says based on the devices that you've added to NAC 3 and the wire you've added to NAC 3, you're going to have 2 volts a drop. Your end of line voltage is going to be 21.4. It gives you all the statistics right then and there. You need 2 12 amp hour batteries. You're using this many devices. It does your device legend, your risers. I mean, it has saved me so many hours in time because I used to have to go do all of that by hand.
So the outlay of capital to get access to this, to license this program, removed CAD Girl.
Yep. So I was paying her about $250 to $300 for my CAD prints, depending on the size. Could be up to $500 depending on the size.
So you were able to take that capital, reinvest it into getting this license. Then now you're doing it.
Yep.
It's your design. It's your everything, and it's your calculations. You get done. You turn them into the fire marshal.
Yep. And so
the building inspector for their approval.
Before this, I was sending them to a Nicet 3 at this point and saying, hey, can you look over this and can you put a stamp on these prints and make sure that I'm good? And so again, I was paying for a reviewer as well. Which is fair. Exactly, which is fair. And I would do these prints in color, nice, and then they would sign them and they'd send them back to me in black and white because they only had a black and white scanner. So now all this color work that I've done is, for naught. And it was something that just bothered me that I knew I didn't want to deal with anymore. And it wasn't the end of the world, but now I'm paying them to print my plans, to review my plans, to put their signature on my plans, and then scan them back. So, now I'm paying anywhere between CAD and alarm review between $400 and $700 on every job, and I just recently,
that's money right out the door.
Yep. And I just recently got my Nicet 3 beginning of February. So
excellent job.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for the paperwork to come back from Nicet, and we know how cordial and pertinent they are in that.
There's 2 women that work there, and there's a whole warehouse full of file cabinets.
Yeah,
That's all it is.
I cannot imagine how daunting that is.
It's just one big long warehouse. So, it's like in the very end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like a big huge. Hold on a second, let me get your file out.
Right.
And I'm teasing. Don't.
So
that's not really the case.
So no, that's been a cool accomplishment. Again, I've had that on my to-do list for about 5 years now. Because for the first 2 years, I claimed hours in test and inspect.
Right.
Because I just didn't know any better, and I was doing test and inspect.
Which by the way, I'm going to officially say this. Test and inspect hours should go against the apprenticeship. They should go. I know they can't.
Agree.
They should be used for the apprenticeship, and they should be used for, obviously, fire alarm Nicet. You can get a fire alarm test and inspect Nicet. But
it doesn't have the same weight as the system.
It doesn't have the same weight as the fire alarm. So, but I will tell you hands down that every single fire alarm inspector I know can probably work in multiple languages, can pull down almost any kind of panel, from an EST3 to a 5207.
Yep. From
a Harrington to a who knows what, a simplex. So you become so well versed at what you do, and I it's a crying shame that they don't see that as something that that
Right.
is viable, because it made me a behemoth in understanding
Yeah.
how these things worked and how to explain them. I became an animal the more
Well,
I
you
the
know,
more I
once
did
you
testing.
once you see a couple hundred of them and you realize the principle, it's very easy to point to it and say, okay, this one clearly is not following the rules. There's,
Hey.
you know,
This one doesn't look like the other 15 I've seen this
Right.
month alone.
exactly, you know, and
Something's
so
wrong with it.
by the time
It's
you
ticking.
get those hours in, it's just becomes so easy. I laugh all the time. You know, I'll hop into a junction box and 30 seconds later, I've got the 2 wires that I need. And the dude walking me around is like, dude, how did you just do that? It's like,
Right.
dude, I was in your shoes 5 years ago.
Exactly.
You
That's
know,
that's exactly right. That's exactly, because I'm showing my apprentice some of those tricks when we start to work, and I'm like, oh well, this is that, and that's that, this that, and he's like, wow.
right.
I'm like, well, it doesn't make sense to you right at the moment, and then this kid is super intuitive, so he's like, he just picks it up right now. Now we got another journeyman that he's a lot like you in a lot of ways, very very bright, very energetic, very cerebral. And he's the same way. He's like, he can look at something, and he says, I'll go take care of that. And in like 15 minutes he's done. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty damn fast.
Right.
That was really fast, actually.
You know, once again, you know, back to the McDonald's thing, once you have a process and you have something that you stick to every time, it just becomes so easy to not take shortcuts. You know, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Remember how long it took you to find your first ground fault?
Long time.
You know, yeah, a lot of headaches, probably about 6 phone calls too. You know,
there
mine
was crying.
Yeah, there is.
There was a great gnashing of
After
teeth.
you've been into that job for 2 or 3 hours and you still can't figure it out, man, and you can't go home until it's fixed.
There's
like,
no feeling like looking at the clock and knowing you have something to do.
It is
You
just
can't get this thing
defeating,
up.
you know, and so, you know, I get calls from people all the time that are either in the apprenticeship or they've journeyed out and they're like, dude, I've been stuck on this for like 2 hours. What do I do? It's like, well, call me about an hour and a half ago, because once you've been spinning your wheels for 30 minutes, like, you're past the point of learning.
Yeah, your
you're only
television's
stressing. You're only, you know, like realizing when to pivot and say, okay, I need somebody else's help, you know, and that was huge for me because it's the same thing. Like, I hadn't really been challenged prior to that, you know, everything was pretty straightforward. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I don't want to be wrong. You know, that's hard for a lot of people, is just saying, hey, I don't know it. Now, if I get into something and I don't know it, I'm on the phone in 10 minutes saying, hey, you might know this, get me pointed in the right direction, you know, and just being available to that feedback and all of that, you know, has paid off a lot, you know, because it's the same thing. It's like, hey, every time you call me, you give me a good breakdown of what's going on. It's like, yeah, because I'm not calling you telling me what to do. I'm calling you and telling you, hey, here's the 15 things that I've done. What's the one thing that I'm missing? You know, and it makes it so easy. I can't tell you how many times I've called you and it's like, all right, Mike, this is what I got. I've done this. I've done this. I've done this. I've done this. You know,
I was sitting in a class one time. We were taking a class one time, and I got a call from a student. Walked out to take it. Joe Price walked by, heard the conversation, knew what was going on, and said, I bet you it's the cover. The cover is supervised. And when you pull the cover, it pulls the power of the duct detector. And I went, did you hear that? The guy goes, yeah.
Push the push button.
Yeah, I put the cover back on. He goes, power's back up. I said, that's the problem. Thanks, Joe.
Right.
So in just a couple of seconds, he picked up on it, knew what the guy was calling for, and then knew the answer,
right,
and then gave me the answer as I hadn't even processed it at that point. That's how quick the guy is.
But about that time that guy calls you and just says, hey, I've got a supervisory on zone 8. What do I do?
Right.
You know? But if you can call him and you can say, here's the number one, here's the 10 things that I've already done. What am I missing? Like, when people show that you've already put that groundwork in, they're a lot more willing to help you instead of just, oh, you called me right now, first thing. Like, call me in 20 minutes after you've done a little bit of digging, you know,
do a little bit of work first.
And I had a couple of those situations too, where it's just like, hey, I don't know. They're like, yeah, well, you're going to know in a minute, you know, figure it out, you know. But because of that, I get calls all the time from, like I said, from even just people where it's like, hey, we've never met, but I got your number from a guy because they said you're good. Like, I'm running into something. Can you help me out? You know, and
but that always helps. It also helps your business.
Yeah,
because people are throwing you bones. So you've got your bids. You're doing your own CAD work. At this point, you've got Alarm CAD. That's the name of the product. So kids look it up, and you got your Nicet 3. So now you're going to save the money because you're going to stamp your own prints.
So now I'm officially at the point to where everything that I do is in-house. I don't
That's
have to
a big
sub.
timer
I don't
right
have
there.
to sub anything out, from the quote to the install to.
And you have dose kiddos.
Yep.
You have 2 kids at this point.
Yep.
Is your wife working?
Yeah, she's a licensed esthetician. Hi, Avery, by the way. She does eyelash extensions. That's her big deal.
So she works as well. And the goal is not to have her like stay home and be a mom.
No, eventually I'd like to have her on my company payroll, you know, and
good
let
time.
her do your she would like to do.
She could do your eyelashes.
She could do my eyelashes, but
I like
I've got
that.
good eyelashes because I don't mess with them. So, you know, there's some esteology knowledge for you on this podcast. That's why we tune in. And
I like her already.
yeah, right. And no, she does an amazing job, and we have really good balance. We're both in charge of our own schedule. And so, you know, we
you can control who's
we both
gonna be with
take
the
every other
kids
Wednesday
and-
off to be with the kids.
What?
You know, so it's just known like.
What do you mean, like you're family oriented?
Yeah,
Get
right.
out.
It's amazing. You know, I've worked at a couple places where there was not a whole lot of time for my family, and I don't want that. And, you know, now that I've been through that, I don't want to ask any of my employees to do that either. You know, I feel like the experiences that I've had up until this point, because this is something that I started and not just I got handed my daddy's company, that I know exactly what I'm asking out of my people when I ask them to do something.
So,
you
but
know.
you don't have any employees.
But I don't
yet.
have any employees right now. No, this is just, you know, I spend a lot of time thinking, okay, when I do have an employee, what is going to be the expectation? What is fair to ask? You know, what do I or don't I want to, you know, have them do, you know?
Back there, girlfriend. I get it.
Yeah.
So when are you going to have an employee? You can forecast. I know you got your bookkeeper's got your book, so
You know,
it may be sooner than you think. It may
Right,
be
right.
later than you're looking at the books going. What do you mean 3 years from now?
Yeah, right. You know, it really all just depends on a couple of the jobs, you know?
Okay.
And so one of the jobs that I did at the end of last year was for a bigger college in the area.
Okay.
And, you know, I just nailed it. And every time they called, it was, you're asking me to jump. How high? Let's do it. I can take care of this. I can fix this, you know?
Love it. Those are the best. Those are the best accounts.
You know?
Education accounts.
Yeah.
School accounts.
You know,
School
and so-
districts are I mean, you know,
Yeah.
are phenomenal.
And so the whole time I'm working with this one guy from the school, and we've never met. We've never really met face to face or anything, but I can call him and I can get an answer, and he can call me and get an answer. And then all of a sudden, right towards the end of the project, I start getting calls from this other guy. And it's like, I don't know you from Adam, but you know, if you're going to call me and ask, I'll entertain it, you know? And he said, can I come out and take a look at the building with you? I was like, yeah, I'll carve out as many hours as you want. If you're willing to learn, like, what do you want to know? And he pulled me to the side and was like, have you ever thought about, you know, coming and working for Pete or for the school? And I was like, no, like I just ventured out on my own. Like I just decided I don't want a boss. Like, thank you, but no thank you, you know? And he was just like, hey, I want you to work here, whether it's as an employee or as a contractor. I just had to ask.
That's a beautiful
You know?
thing.
And so now we're getting this going, and I'm at the point where, you know, I'm just kind of waiting on them to say, let's go. You know, but they've got enough buildings as far as inspections go, and then they've got, you know, something
So
like,
you are doing inspections
I'm
too.
hoping to do Yeah, I am. I do inspections at the moment, just not a whole lot of them because people don't know, you know, and most of these other companies that are referring me work, they do inspections. So when they get a call for an inspection, we can do that, you know? And so most of the stuff that I get from the other companies is either new install or takeover, so, you know, bigger than their size, or again, we've got this job coming up that we don't think we have the manpower for. Can you come and give us a hand? And so my inspection stuff's kind of lagging behind, and that's fine. I knew it would. The recurring stuff's hard to pick up because there's so many people out there that want it. And, you know, I know that the national company that they're using right now is expensive, you know, and they're frustrated because every year they're getting sent out 3 different people. So every year they're having to relearn.
That is
you know?
crushing. And,
Yeah.
and by the way, having been on both sides of the fence, okay,
Yep.
having been an inspector and a contractor and
And a
having-
manager,
and
you
a
know?
manager weasel and a you know, and you know, back on this side of the fence, where having people who are familiar with your property and having people who know all the ins and outs, because everybody goes, oh well, that's just a building. No, that's a building with drop doors. It's a building with
Right.
people, you know, with a pre-action system. This is a building with an EPO. You shut this down. Okay, the computers go offline. When those computers go offline, there goes blankety blank. I mean, we had this happen when I worked for one of the companies where they inadvertently shut down a server that was very important to a federal branch of the government.
Okay.
Very important. My boss and I went back. It was like basically no one's going to touch this thing, but
Until we work out a process.
you know, me and Bill and I. So Bill and I went back and looked at it. We figured out what the problem was. We put the right switches in, And then it got to the point where the only person who's going to touch that is now going to be Mike. So if Mike's here, we can touch it. If Mike's here, I don't want anybody touching it. Well, then I eventually left the company and went to another company. That company, my other company, the last one, it picks up that account.
Yeah.
So I walk in that server room and the guy goes, we have had this thing shut down. And I just wanted to go, I know the whole story from every single time, because it didn't get shut down. Once got down, shut multiple times
right.
because of a confusion. So, they're telling me years later, this is 6 years later, 7 years later,
they're still bringing up the event that you were a part of. They're still bringing up the event that I was a part of, that I just want to think the guy goes, I was the guy who solved the problem. I was actually the fixer of that and the preventer of that. But I get it. I didn't let the guy do that. I just let him go off and right.
These guys suck. I know everything sucks. But that is knowing what pitfalls are where, and then knowing that your inspectors know those pitfalls is critical. Mm-hmm. It's just so critical.
And I mean, you've said the same thing in class, and I tell the same thing to everybody. It's like I could teach a monkey how to do the fire alarm side of things.
You can.
If you have integrity and honesty and accountability, you could be the best fire alarm technician in the world. I mean, literally, just having the integrity to say, hey, I ran into this and it was wrong and it needs to be repaired, instead of passing it on the inspection. I ran into that a lot because, again,
you tested all this in 62 seconds.
Right.
How'd you do that?
When you don't have the people above you to fix things, it makes it really hard to point out that problem, because now you're just going to get stuck with, all right, well, here you go out and fix it, right. And that happened a lot at the first company that I'd worked for too, where it was like me and a couple of the other alarm inspectors knew, like, there's no troubleshooter right now. Like, right. who's going to pick these calls up? Like, everything we're writing up has to get fixed. Who can fix
immediately,
it?
By
immediately.
The way.
Yeah, exactly. Who can even start to fix this stuff, And so that was really when I kind of started getting into the troubleshooting thing. And it was just like, okay, hold on a second. Here's now all these reports that I've been going behind that have been saying that they're good, that they're definitely not good, And I mean, I guess it's just like, thank goodness that somebody in our business found it and not, somebody 10 years down the line, or an insurance person, or what. And so,
right. or worse.
Right. If people just don't understand, like, this is fire life safety. Every single thing that you put down matters. It's important. It's on that report for a reason. It needs to be checked. Like, for me, like I said, back to the black and white, like, this is why fire is great for me. Mm-hmm. There's not it's like, no, here is very clearly in the code what you will or will not do when it comes to testing this device and the intervals. Like, yep. I need it spelt out like that. I need the rigidity. And if somebody wants to argue, I will happily jump in the code book and tell you why you're wrong. I called you about one the other day about, electrician trying to share neutrals on my load for my fire alarm panel. Mm-hmm. It took me 8 phone calls, but I got it figured out, and got to call the electrician back that was telling me he didn't care about my opinion, but he needed a code. And it's like, okay, well, here's the 3 code references that you're violating, like,
have a nice
I'm
day.
Competitive. I like to win. Good luck. Like, we'll figure this out. I like to think I'm pretty sharp when it comes to the code stuff. So usually when somebody's like, no, that's not right, I'm like, let's get to the bottom of this, because either way, one of us is going to now have the correct answer, and that's important to me. And again, just being able to say, hey, I ran into this and I don't know how to handle this. Like, you're going to grow so much more just admitting that and saying that, instead of losing sleep at night because, I ran into that one duct detector that I couldn't figure out, but I passed it on the exam because I didn't want to have to go back and deal with it,
Yep. Because they didn't want to mess with it.
Because they didn't want to mess with it.
They don't want to take the time for it.
Right, exactly. It's just easier to put pass and move on and let the next guy catch it.
I could probably, we've all run into those situations where you're like, oh God, I can't,
Yep.
But at least document what the hell you did.
Yeah.
At least give somebody a shoe in.
That will take you so much further.
You're going to need anti-gravity boots to get to this duct detector. Yep. I'm sorry. I don't know how the heck you're going to reach it. You're just not,
It's just one of those things where, I've always known, as soon as I got into the industry, it was like, okay, I can see myself staying in this.
Yeah.
And so everything from then on has just been, how can I make it better?
So now you've got you're in with a couple of clients, you're getting business moving in, and you just sent your books off for the first year. So you've been in business how long now? A year and a half?
July last year was the first, time that I started business. But yeah, technically my business got started at the beginning of 2022. Okay. So we're going on, 15 months of my business existing, about 9 months of me actually doing this
Doing
full
it.
time, with no
And
other
you're
job.
not starving.
No, I'm paying the bills. Everything's okay. I'm not making as much as I would like to, obviously,
Okay.
and obviously I don't think any small business should be just making 6 figures a year out of the jump, but I'm paying myself enough to keep my lights on and keep my family fed and keep everything going at my business. And so that's a smashing success as far as I'm
absolutely.
concerned. I know it's only going to get bigger, and again, with my little children right now, like I got no problem if I only work 25 hours this week. That's 15 extra hours that I get at home with my kids that I know I won't have in the future,
Well,
and
so what you're saying is that quality time, right now it's working out good because as your kids are this age, you get that quality time with them.
Yep.
And of course, when they get older, they won't want you to be around them anyway.
And then I can be busy.
Then you can be really, really busy.
And so, it's amazing. I love being able to take my daughter to school or pick her up in the middle of the day. She just gets so surprised when it's me or, just being able to say, hey, let's go catch a movie. I can carve out time for that. I can be home by this time. I don't have anybody to answer to except for, the projects that I take on, and
as long as you hit your timelines.
Exactly. As long as I'm keeping everything paid and I'm growing at the rate that I'd like to see, progress, I really can't complain. I'm finally now at this point, I'm at the point to where I have basically all the equipment that I've deemed necessary, office side and field side. I'm a plotter and a scanner away from, I don't even have to leave the house to do any facet of this job,
And literally, I would say since I've known you, this is the whole transition from the time I've met you to now, I think has been less than 5 years.
Yep. I think
it's been less than 5.
I started buying tools for this at the beginning of 2018.
Okay. So 2018.
Yep.
It's now, 20. Yeah.
Yep. I carted out in end of 21 and.
So there is, okay. I was super excited when I got Dakota on here because he just plotted out his last 5 years or less than 5 years for you in this podcast, right? This was a student. This was a hard worker. This was a guy who wanted to go do his own thing and is now doing his own thing. Now, we could check in 5 years from now when you roll up in your Benz or whatever.
My very nice Toyota Camry.
or you go. You never know. But this is a guy who's on the path. So there's no reason why if you weren't a great security guy or an access control guy or a door guy or any of the other telco guy that you can't do this given coming in with the right attitude, the right momentum and
mentality, really. And
since Farmer Fire Protection is on the web, you can call him, you can find him, you could talk to him. And that's how this industry works. That's how we go from being meh to being huge, to being a shaker and mover. I'm thoroughly impressed, Dakota.
Well, thank you very much.
Thoroughly
It's
impressed.
been really cool to see
And I didn't
all
mean
the
to
hard
cut
work
you
pay off.
short. I think we probably could.
We could stay here for another 2 hours, really.
We probably could. Tell the listeners something else that is important to you that you want to pass along to them.
Just find something that, like I said earlier, that scratches that itch for you. Mm-hmm. And if you can make it work, don't stop chasing it. When I was back at that appliance delivery thing, it's funny enough, my wife worked there with me. She was the front receptionist, and we were in Cabo for our 3rd anniversary, and we were there for 5 days. And on the 2nd day of us being there, she literally said, "I don't want to go back to work." And it's like, we're on day 2 of vacation, and you hate your job so much that you're already letting it affect your vacation. I just looked at her and said, "Quit it. What do you want to do? Like, stop."
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, I've kind of thought about doing the aesthetics." And literally the day we got back, we got her signed up for aesthetics school, and she went and made it happen.
She said, I tell people to cast their bait.
Yep.
I say, I look over there and I go, I'm going to cast my bait right there and catch a fish. Watch. Boom. And I go there and I catch a fish. I mean, that's the way my wife, that's the way my life has worked mostly. I certainly have also got snagged a few times. So that's kind of what you did. She said, I don't really want to go back to work. Work sucks. And you said, good, let's go do something that you want to do.
What do you want to do? You know, I'm big on the sayings because I think they do carry a lot of practicality. You know, if the path you're on is clear, it's not yours. You know, we all get dropped in the middle of the jungle at 18 years old and they say, good luck. What do you want to do with your life? You know, and a lot of people have a really nice path that's carved for them. And that's easy, you know, but is that your dream? Or did somebody else lay out the path for you to get there? You know, and I feel like with my wife and her venture and myself and this venture, it's just been really cool to see what we're capable of. You know, push ourselves and see this dream come to fruition, really. I mean, like I said, I've been thinking about this since 2018. And every time that I write myself a paycheck, I just get a big fat smile on my face because I did it for another month, you know?
Every time I write myself my paycheck,
it's just...
That you should put on your shirt.
That's what we're doing this for.
Every time I write myself my paycheck, that's funny.
You know, I'm about to put a sticker on my van that says Oregon's best LEA, according to the owner's mom.
Do it.
You know, I'm gonna because
do it.
You know,
you
that's
need
the
one
kind
of those
confidence.
cricket things. My
I
wife
have
has
one. That's how I made this shirt. Thank you.
Yeah,
I taught myself this too.
So you did that.
Yep. I do all my own logo design. I paid one of my friends who's a graphic designer to make my logo and get me the files.
You're a big timer. That's excellent. I had no idea you made that yourself.
I have ADHD, and so when I get into something, it's super hardcore. Let's learn everything we can about it, you know?
I told my wife, I says, I want the outline of the Wild E Coyote,
so
I can put it on every dent on every car, because I have every vehicle I own, something's hit it at some point. I just love when I see this big crashes in that Wild E Coyote.
We can make that happen. Just let me know.
Dakota, what a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a blast. Thank you very much for having me on.
You come back?
I would do this anytime.
Big timer.
You let me know I'm here.
All right, man.
So wonderful. Thank you very much.
Right on the money.
Thanks for listening to the Half Watt Podcast. We always want to hear from you, and we encourage you to email us at halfwattpod@gmail.com with questions or even your own stories. Funny, crazy, or praiseworthy, we want to hear it all. You can follow us on Instagram at Halfwattpod to stay up to date on our feed. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share us with a friend, the best way to help us grow. The Half Watt Podcast is a production of Now Hear This Studios.